Is it time for you to start your own tabletop sports gaming tournament? Yes, always the time, now more than ever. Just like it's time to start your own tabletop sports gaming channel, but that's a video I've shot several times I'm still not happy with, but I'll get to this first. Starting your own tabletop sports gaming event. Now, it was 10 years ago that the APBA regional tournaments really got underway, sparked in no small part by this Robert Henry Memorial Tournament, which had its roots in the last unofficial APBA tournament held in Lancaster, the company's former headquarters, in 2012. The company moved to Georgia, and the Bridesburg Boys and Girls Club, which had been attending Lancaster for the previous year or two, 2011, 2012, could not make the trip to Georgia. And so the idea was born, why don't we hold a tournament outside Philadelphia where they can continue to play? And so John Cochran, Dr. Rebecca Peterson, Pete Simonelli, Steve Scoff, a bunch of other folks created this tournament. Around the same time, in April of 2013, folks started talking about a Chicagoland tournament. I remember, in fact, it was Doug Schuyler on April 14th posted on Delphi. Was going to start a Chicago tournament called Chicagoland. That tournament has grown by leaps and bounds. Rob Spatz now runs it. They, at some points, had a summer and a winter version of that tournament. At this point, there are about 24 APBA regional tournaments, concentrated primarily in the Northeast here and in the Midwest. You got your Greater Michigan, your Toledo, Glass City, your Twin Cities, your Wisconsin, you've got your Delaware, you've got Slippery Rock, you've got the Great Shoeless Joe Jackson by Jack Dolan. Now, he's got a cool venue, a minor league venue down there in South Carolina. Of course, Frank Famai is taking APBA to sea with a cruise to the Bahamas in January of next year. So I want to talk to you about a few tips regarding venue, how to find a venue, how to communicate with folks, and how to do a good postmortem so that you can build something that maintains momentum. As I mentioned, the summer of 2013 was when this really took off for APBA. I know that Stratomatic has a league registry, and I imagine a bunch of tournaments related to that. We've talked to Meredith Adkins about his Stratomatic football tournament that they've held at CincyCon. So let's talk first about the venue. Venues do not have to be extravagant. They can be anything that is a space that people want to get paid for you to use. Whether it's a Hall of Fame, it is a VFW, a church, a hotel, you name it. Maybe even an art festival that will allow you a booth just to demo some games for folks. The sky's the limit, and this is a very creative community and a very generous community that will really jump on board with your idea and help you see it through. Now, we did Cooperstown, and it was surprisingly affordable. And we're doing Canton, our 10th anniversary in August, fairly affordable, different rules and strictures and all that. But basically, anyone who has a space for rent, it's maybe a hotel, they have conference personnel and a page that will show you some rates, and you request a proposal, and you can build the event from there. Hotels are great because you've got food and parking. A VFW, just when I had one of my early bands, we rented a VFW because they needed the money and they had the space available, and we rented the place and did a little rehearsal with our new drummer for a few hours. It was great. Don't think they wanted us back, but hey, it was the 80s, and that's where a lot of punk bands started to hold their own events. You know, it's the same kind of thing. So sports, games, and events are very punk. Think of it that way. You want a venue that can accommodate at least a dozen folks. Some events are likely to start with about a dozen or fewer folks, but you never know. If you have a particularly desirable destination, you may end up renting, a floor of a ship. You know, who knows? Your imagination and your understanding of the community that you're targeting will kind of dictate what venue you want to use. Scout out a few, consider the pros and cons. Again, availability of food and all those factors. Do they have catering in-house, or can you bring your own food? Which brings me to the second task, reaching out to the people who run that venue. I prefer email instead of phone because you have a paper trail and you can spell out very clearly. We are a tabletop gaming community. We play this game or that game. We need X number folding tables. We expect a dozen folks, 24 folks. Do you have a minimum head count? Do you charge by the hour? Do you charge a flat 1 hour fee and then subsequent hours at discount? How do you do it? How can we work it? How long is the venue open? Is there parking? All those things. Do you require a minimum catering amount if you have it inbuilt, or if you have a partner. In Cooperstown, we use the wonderful Stagecoach Coffee. They had a great selection of food. Reach out to the people who run the tournament by email, say have a trail, and start the dialogue. Some folks may take more explaining than others. What are you talking about? Others have probably held events like that, whether it's bridge or bingo, whatever, a bingo hall, you name it. Again, I think an arts festival, that would be really cool. Or a flea market or something where it's just a community get-together, or maybe a street fair, who knows. Anything that helps get the game out into the community and beyond the community, I think, is really a key. That's what we're kind of shooting for here. So you found your venue and you've reached out to the people who run it, and you're going to hammer out now the details. In addition to those details about the venue, you have to detail how you're going to get folks there. Do they have mass transit? Are they going to drive? Airport if necessary? What are your rules going to be? How are you going to engage folks? Do you have a committee backing you up? All those kinds of things. Do you have to bring food or drinks? Are you going to incorporate any other event, like a minor league game that goes with the tournament, if you have a venue like that, or have a team nearby? Any other things that you can kind of dovetail with your event? Will you try to maybe establish a league? Do you have a mission for your event? Will you have a 2-year or 5-year plan for it? It really helps to kind of scope out the breadth of your mission and what you could possibly achieve. Think way outside the box and kind of gauge what your audience could be. And then you have to start communicating and creating content regarding the event. And this goes not only for promoting your event on all the socials that we all know and love and are using, but also creating content at the event. Have a plan for gathering information, interviews, demos, whatever. If you've got folks who are really knowledgeable, man, you've got to get that content that you can use to promote your event in subsequent years and get it some attention and publicity in the APBA newsletter, for instance, or your own blog, or whatever way you can disseminate that information to folks to say, hey, these games are fun. You should play them. If you like vintage sports, classic sports, or even current sports, these are the games you should play, and you can play them head-to-head if you start your own tournament. So that's one of the reasons to start these as well, is to get people playing face-to-face. So many of us play solitaire that you want to really, it engages the community and energizes the community. So that's part of your mission statement. What rules are you going to have? And keep in mind, this is where previous tournament directors are absolutely eager to help you. In 2015, Tom Nelshopen posted on his APBA blog a series of Q&As with tournament directors, me and some others, about what they learned, what they originally set out to do, and what they actually achieved, and how they sustained their events. Really informative, and obviously by now we're approaching summer 2023, so 10 years out from the APBA community's creation of all these regional tournaments, you've got a big body of knowledge that's been built. I'm sure most tournament directors would be happy to share their rules with you. In fact, I've talked to one or two, and there's been consideration here or there. Folks are thinking about creating a primer for how to launch your own tabletop sports game tournament. Will it be focused on one game, several games, a general theme? A theme like, have you heard of The Lonesome Loser? That's Rob Spatz's Chicagoland theme. Lots of creativity goes into this, so really think it through. Think through the logistics. Imagine that you're planning a family vacation for a dozen strangers. Think of it that way. You've got to be up by this time. You've got to be in and out by this time. What are the weather considerations? If you're going to, perhaps like the Twin Cities did, encounter a freak snowstorm at the end of the winter season there, although in Minnesota it's not really a freak. And speaking as a former Mainer, I know that April, maybe even May, I don't remember exactly, but yeah, you'll get that snow event, and that's where you talk to the folks who run the facility to say, what could our contingency be if we have a weather day? Can we have a backup day and plan? Would you accommodate that? And speaking of accommodations, if folks are coming from out of town like they do for Chicagoland and for a lot of these tournaments, they're so popular that getting folks attending 3 or 4 or 5 of them, that of course you have to have your accommodations nailed down. Are they close to the event? Do you need to arrange transportation? Will folks be driving or taking mass transit? All those details. Start having that plan worked up and be able to communicate those effectively, and have someone look at a draft of your emails. Keep them not too long, particularly with Facebook now. They've lost the articles or notes feature, which used to give you a much more presentable post. So I would consider maybe creating an event page and sharing updates there. You decide what frequency of updates you'd like to engage in. If it's a really high profile venue and folks are going to be traveling from out of town, you really want to give them more notice, particularly if it's in the summer and it's a vacation season, if folks are planning, what to do with their families. Maybe choose your venue based on what families can do outside of the event so that you can get your attendees to maybe bring the family and they can engage in some other activities while you're actually rolling the dice and having that great time face to face. Now, I've already addressed the rules. Do you want to have awards? A lot of these tournaments have awards, and depending on all your costs, maybe you have folks donate a little extra for an award. You have to manage those funds. You have to gauge if you're charging the right thing. If you want to pad that a bit and say, hey, we're all contributing to the final award. It can be a certificate, a plaque, something bigger. Chicagoland does that great glove. In Cooperstown, there are a couple of bat companies that we could have used for an award. I ended up using Cameo with the tournament winner's favorite player, personalized message from them. So many athletes, particularly we always talk about the Minnesota Vikings, the former players, so many of them are engaged through Skoll Marketing to provide personalized videos and signed gear and things like that. So the sky's the limit on what you'd like to provide. And certainly, in addition to holding your event and a nice business in your locality, certainly patronizing local businesses and a local trophy company, or say if in Cooperstown, if you wanted to give someone a bat, use one of the companies that makes bats there, or even use the Hall of Fame. Keep the money in the sporting community and the tabletop community. If you know folks who create custom stadiums, a nice custom stadium could be an award. Lots of cool little things you can do. Certainly when you're communicating to folks are going to jump in with a lot of ideas about what they like to see and what you could do. And again, talk to previous tournament directors to see what's worked for them, what hasn't, how you fund it, how you provide the award, all that good stuff, if you want to go that route. And it's a nice little thing to do, but there's so many creative ways to keep folks, give them appreciation for them participating in your tournament, because no tournament happens unless people show up. And that's the thing that I always, it's always kind of folks will say, oh, if you're starting a tournament, you might hear, well, it'll be great if it happens. Well, every tournament happens if folks show up. So whoever said, I don't know if it's going to happen, needs to just sign up and go. And now after you've had your tournament, you need to follow up. Do a postmortem, gather all your content, plan how you're going to promulgate that content across social media. Find venues like Saber's Gaming and Simulations Committee. You'll find that we wrote up a summary of our event at the Baseball Hall of Fame. At the same time, Randy Corrier wrote a summary for the APBA newsletter, and Steve Ryan, the tournament winner, wrote a summary for his blog. So get the information out there, show people how exciting the event was and how much fun people had, and start the plan for next year. Always have that year ahead plan, or 2 years or 5 years. Think about, well, after I assess all the rules that worked, the issues that cropped up that the rules didn't address, and maybe our next set of rules will, then you start to create that 1 year plan for outreach. What outreach worked better? How did people respond to it? Did they respond at certain times more than others when you sent the email, whether the morning or the night or the weekend, a week out, 2 weeks out, a month out? And again, you have to consider your audience and where folks are coming from. If it's a very local, your travel isn't obviously as much a consideration, as opposed to if they're going to a destination tournament and really having to plan their travel. So now I've got those wheels churning, right? And you're thinking about your own tabletop sports gaming tournament. If you ever want to bounce ideas off anyone in the community, if you want to reach out to me, as always, APBA Football Club Original at gmail.com. Happy to share my experiences talking to folks about a tournament, keeping momentum going. We had an organizing committee at Cooperstown, Canton. We've got a 2-day tournament instead of a 1-day tournament because the game is long and requires that. I can't wait to see what folks come up with going forward from here, the 10-year anniversary of that legendary APBA Summer of 2013. Plan your event, pick a good venue, communicate to folks, engage them in the growth process, plan ahead for the next year or two. And another important factor to consider before we close here is think about having a backup director and or a successor. Maybe your tournament gets a lot of momentum and your life circumstances change. You might want to have someone waiting in the wings who has the same passion and enthusiasm and the understanding of the mission and the reasons for the origin of this event, who could take it forward. These events are incredible platforms, not only for engaging and energizing the sports gaming community, but for outreach beyond the gaming community. That's one of my key missions, is creating content that ripples out gradually. It doesn't have to be viral here, but we're really trying to engage more folks as we consider the future of tabletop sports gaming, cards and dice gaming. That is something that can pay broader dividends as we reach out to folks who are fans of not only contemporary sports, but players they've heard of but didn't really relate with. Kids today who hear about Maris and Mantle and the great home run race, or Pele. What better way for them to really engage and immerse themselves in this sports lore than through these games? These types of events and unique venues can help achieve that. Look, there are a lot of, speaking of venue again, look at all the tabletop gaming conferences and cafes in various cities. Boy, what a great place to hold a tabletop sports gaming event. Again, we talked about the Stratomatic football guys who play right in dead center of that CincyCon amid all those great role-playing games and war games. I can't wait to see what you come up with. Check out all the tips from tournament directors that Tom Nelshopen posted on his APBA blog a few years ago. Reach out to tournament directors, ask to see their rules if they're okay with that, modify accordingly, come up with your own set. Sky's the limit. You'll be surprised at how eagerly folks jump in to help in any way they can. And again, if you have any thoughts or questions about what our experiences have been holding tabletop gaming tournaments, feel free to reach out to us at appafootballcluboriginal@gmail.com. And speaking of tournaments, don't forget that APBA's annual tournament is coming up in June, and we will be at PlayCon to talk a little APBA football out there. So sign up for a tournament, start your own tournament, keep rolling.